Sorry, and I forgot. So just as an FYI, it's for those who just joined, before I continue, we will be recording today's session. So if you want to change your name and anonymize yourself, please feel free to do so. Let us know and we can stop the recording and start again. So raise your hand if you're going to be planning on doing that, and we can take a moment to pause. Okay, otherwise your name will be viewed in the actual recording video. So as I was saying, today we'll be going over the pilot that the Engendered Collective and Zamplo have worked on together for the past several months, and we're really excited to share this opportunity with you. Just briefly before we get into the details of the pilot, I wanted to, for those of you who haven't heard, a little bit about the Engendered Collective. We are a community of survivors, advocates, and pro-feminist allies. And we have 3 pillars. We come together in knowledge sharing and knowledge production. So part of that is through the podcast. We have a platform where we share resources. We have film nights and book clubs. Second pillar is collective care and healing, and this is certainly a part of that as well. Sharing and understanding the impact of trauma and the abuse that we've experienced has on our physiologies and emotions. And finally, advocacy to end sexist oppression, exploitation, and violence. And this partnership that we have endeavored with Zamplo is a part of that 3rd pillar. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Shanil, who's going to give you a very brief overview of what Zamplo is. And then we're going to do some case examples. I'll be speaking as well as Karen. And if you have any questions, feel free at the bottom of the screen. There is a special Q&A option. You can put your questions there and we'll save your questions to the end. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Shanil.
Thank you, Terry. Good morning. Karen and I are based out of Calgary, Canada, so the western part of Canada, and that's where we're headquartered. And I'll tell a bit about Zamplo. I assume everybody could see my screen. It's a welcome message. And so Zamplo is a social enterprise. It started a few years ago, and it's focused mainly on empowering people with data. And we have clinical studies as well as people using it in the cancer space as well as rare disease. And talking to Terry and Karen, say, well, I think a lot of the tool set could be used in coercive control situations. And so what we want to do here, the goal of this webinar is to form a pilot. The pilot is to see if Zamplo can empower you with your own information to be able to show patterns. You can record your information, and you could also distribute that information securely to whomever you deem important. You could create a community, and also because the platform is used in research, Terry could collect de-identified data in order to influence policy, and let Terry share a bit more about that throughout the presentation. And the goals of this pilot, and what our ask is today, as is for Friday, is we want volunteers to start using it for their own use and to test if Zamplo would be a good product in this situation. And your contribution matters because we are going to present the results of this pilot at the International Coercive Control Conference in October. And so a bit about Zamplo and the history. So Zamplo started from my own lived experience as a cancer caregiver to my late wife, and she exceeded the odds when she was diagnosed with lung cancer as a non-smoker. And what she did was she was able to record and analyze all her information and look for patterns, and that helped her quality of life. She developed routines of good habits and routines of tracking pain and finding what worked and what didn't work. And then she also found a network of peers from around the world who are exactly like her. So that was the genesis for Zamplo, and those are the tool sets that have come in. And To give you an idea of the power of Zamplo, we're going to switch to a TikTok video that Karen did. And it kind of illustrates how Zamplo could be used in a variety of context. And in this case, it's with domestic violence. It's about a 2-minute video. Okay. So I just have to rewind this one, just to bear with me.
Everything.
Oh, 1 second. Let me just refresh. So I just ask everybody to mute themselves because I think it's easier on the audio because it's playing. So I'm going to mute myself as well.
Hi, my name is Karen Gosby. Today I'm going to take you through the Zamplo app and show you the benefits being a domestic violence survivor. This is what the app looks like when you open it up. Hit that plus orange button to get quick notes. Document all your health and trauma information. In my case, I had 2 non-strangulation attempts among the many times he grabbed my neck. Put as much detail, everything, like what you were wearing, what was the conflict, who was involved. It will all be diarized and saved. It's important for both health and legal professionals to show patterns and behaviors. Looking after you is the most important, and it should be a daily occurrence. It can be found in your Mindful Minutes section of the app. The app allows you to record customized personal symptoms. This information can show the correlation of all things occurring when one is living with domestic violence. As you turn your attention to the screen, you can see the health information that can be layered over the trauma to visually show the patterns of abuse, to educate one that is in a current relationship with domestic violence. The app will also send daily reminders to take your medication and your own personal idea of self-care. Another key feature are the surveys. The surveys can be used for anything. In this particular instance, we've got a domestic violence screen. You can upload addiction, any kind of screening, anything to build awareness for the survivors, or use this for clinical data. The most important feature of the app is connecting them to the community. This is to provide a warm hand, someone that has informed experience, that is able to mentor, wrap around them, give them information, connect them to informed therapists, healthcare providers, legal professionals, empower the survivors to make the best informed decisions for themselves. The Zamplo app is absolutely confidential. This information is not shared with anybody, just who the person decides they can trust. Please scan the QR code and download Zamplo to see the many other features the app offers to empower survivors of the domestic violence community to make the best informed decisions for themselves, their children, and for their future. Thank you. Hi, my name is Karen Gosby. Today I'm going to take you through the Zamplo.
Okay. That video was presented to a conference in Australia with Dr. Williams and allowed them to download the application. But please hold off downloading the application and we'll explain what the process is in the next steps. But I think what I'd like to do as the next steps is, sorry, I have a lot of windows open here. We want to go into real life examples of using Zamplo. And so Karen's going to give examples of being actively in a relationship and how Zamplo could be used. I'll drive the application and then Karen could narrate the story.
All right.
So yeah, sorry, maybe I'll just mention one thing is Zamplo could be used on the web, but also there's a mobile app for your Apple and your iPhone, or iPhone and your Android. And so what we'll do here is present you from the web version of the application. Karen, please. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for attending this. I know it is invading your restful weekend, and it's not the greatest way to start off Sunday morning, but it is from the perspective of empowering and informing people that are using it, and the system. That's what we're trying to do. In my particular case, I'm going to talk about being in a relationship that has active abuse in it, and the person not entirely aware of what's going on, but it could be recommended. We're hoping it would be recommended by a healthcare physician or maybe an emergency as this becomes more widely understood and used. So in my own case, I was under constant surveillance. I had, I didn't have full access to my computer or to my phone. And as technology evolved, I started to become aware of the fact that I needed to document it more. And it wasn't so much to archive and to aggregate all the material, thinking that I was going to do something about it in the legal realm. It was more so to try and inform me at what point did I want to do something about the situation I was in. And was it really that dire? Was it that bad? Because I was kind of pulling from my my peers and from people that should be sort of knowledgeable people in the field, my therapist and all that. No one really seemed to be able to give me any kind of advice. And at some point I just thought, okay, I have to do more of a deeper dive into the situation and find it out, because I can't rely on people, because I don't think anyone really understood the reality of the situation. So I started to, because he would go on this, I started to, in the notes features that I think it came in 2010, I masked it as I was tracking my menstrual cycles. And what I was doing was putting a date and trying to put the impetus of what happened when the fight occurred. But if I'd had the Zamplo feature where I could give the entire point leading up, and Terry, Chanel, are you going to go on the end? Yeah. If I could give all the details of what was what started the fight, what happened before. In my event, there would be a lot of outbursts that would end up with holes in walls. And if you go to the notes, Chanel?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where I could just write the date and then tell everything, like, everything that occurred in that situation, because as people know, it's not just a one and done. It's usually a 24 or 48 hour ordeal. And the fact that there are other layers that, he was waking me up in the middle of the night. He was terrorizing me over that 48-hour period. It would have an impact on how I was parenting, how I was driving, how I was conducting myself in the community. So I think that if I understood the context and the impact it was having on those 4 or 5 days in its entirety, it would have been, I think it would have been more realized on my end. And then having a situation like that going right into my routines and the mindful minutes, and being able to track exactly what was going on in my biorhythms of, in my case, I would always have an uptick of IBS, nervousness, and like I said, the irritability. And I think one of the biggest indicators with people that are in a situation like this is that they have a really hard time concentrating, and they are very frenetic, like they are quite nervous, and that's usually sort of a recognition of people around them, and should be with the healthcare, or if they're at school, it would inform all of us that are within the relationship, but also the people that are managing them. And which brings me to the point that a lot of times I would end up going to my physician and saying I have these symptoms, and I was trying to learn how to manage them. And neither one of us had this awareness that these symptoms were because of the fact that I was in this relationship. I can ask my physician or someone that I did greatly trust her, and I don't blame her at all, but she could be a caregiver in the future. And I could, if I had had something like this, I would be able to download all of from a PDF. I could send it to her. I could print it out. I could give it to anyone that would have access to the file, or I could just print out all the information and hand it over to other people, to lawyers, to my parents, whatever, but just show how with the conflict that's occurring in the purple and how it was having such an impact on my health. And I think other than just having these little sort of notes in my phone, I would be able to see it, and it would be something that I couldn't really, deny, because it was there in front of my face. And realizing that the situation, I was greatly impacted by it, and it was just something that was starting to occur from me tracking the conflicts. It was at least every 3 to 4 weeks. So I think from the perspective of, the health information that you have, I had been tracking this from 2010 when technology allowed me to do it. I had to hide it on my phone, and one of the features is that I could have gone onto the website, gone to a friend's house, and updated all of this, not had anything on my phone at all. I could go to my parents' public library, and it would be sort of a hidden tool to empower myself and not have any trace back that I had stored all this information, which I think would have been greatly a benefit. And it would empower me knowing that I had this, because in my own case, what I needed to do when I had a situation where when I was physically assaulted and I took pictures, I had to print them off, download them. A lot of times, going back to when we did have conflict, there would be a lot of texting back and forth, and I'd have to take screenshots. And this was kind of leading up. Anyway, it ended up having a big file that I stored within my house, and my dad had one as well. It wasn't as detailed as the one I had, but when we had our flood in 2013, it was hidden in the basement. I lost all that documentation and only had the stuff that was kind of piecemeal that my dad had, or stuff that I could kind of get from the computer, from stuff that I had saved in the iCloud. So I think the most important thing here is when you're in a situation like this, you don't understand how useful and how important all this information is when you do get informed and you're educated and you decide to do something about it. And it's again, so important from the perspective of understanding how your health is impacted by it, but also from a legal perspective. And I think the one thing that started to inform me was when I started to connect to community. And for myself in my own situation, my abuser had addiction issues, and I was starting to talk to people that had similar patterns and behaviors in their own situation. And I was becoming more informed of the reality of the situation. And it wasn't until I had that community and knowing I was talking to someone that was very familiar with the same situation. But again, it was under the umbrella of Al-Anon, and that was kind of a clipped conversation that wasn't entirely understood. And so I think if you were specifically connecting to a survivor community that specifically dealt with domestic violence, it would be a shorter timeline.
it would have been for myself, because I would have been directed to the specific information that I would needed to know about the reality of my situation. And I could be directed to the people that were experts, and they were ones that were going to empower myself to make the right decisions for myself and for my family. I can't think of anything else that I should include on this. Chanel, can you think of anything in my own situation?
I think one thing you could do is how you could track every time you see a lawyer or a member of your team. And so not only can you track symptoms, but you also could track encounters as well.
Well, and when you go back to reinforcing what happens when you're documenting a fight, I was thinking about how specific the triggers are when you have left a situation, and Terry will talk more about that. But I think when you're in a relationship that's abusive, you don't really understand what's going on within you and in the situation you're in. But my triggers, I think for me, would be just having contact with the abuser in the context of what it is that's putting you in a situation where you're most likely to lead to conflict. And, really, when you're trying to break it down and you're realizing it, what you're understanding is that it's everything and there's really nothing you can do. So I just think by the diligent reminders of, how it prompts you to fill out your routines, take your medication, like how you're feeling and all that, I think it would cause someone to realize that the triggers are sort of, they're so vast and they're not specific. But they can be at some point, if you feel like you're getting more directed, they can be catered or curated to your specific situation.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
I think what we'd like to do is maybe Terry, can you want to give some examples in terms of from your perspective how Zamplo could be used? But should we open it up to questions for Karen first?
No, I think we should leave the questions until the end. So I don't see anyone having put any questions in the Q&A. I just wanted to call out the reminder that if you do have any questions, feel free to put it in, or we'll welcome you to verbally articulate them as well later. So just to sort of step back a little and provide some context and to what Karen has shared. When Chanel talked about this app and this pilot, the three benefits that he referenced was the benefit to the individual, empowering the individual to take control over their individual health. And the second part was connecting with community, and the third part was using this tool as a tool for data accountability and transparency. So there's a societal benefit. So, I think that we want to be clear that not all of these benefits will we be able to see right away. And part of the value of this app is building the community and the data. So the more data sets we have, the more people who are using it, the more that we're storing, the more we can start seeing the patterns. So, with regard to self-empowerment, I think that in Karen's case, she spoke about not knowing and not having contacts to understand what she was going through. She was in a coercive controlling relationship. And for the most part, the coercive control was not physical, although, the examples she gave were physical. So, for many people, even though we're piloting this specifically for domestic violence survivors, people might not have the vocabulary. They may lack the vocabulary, they may lack the support network, they may even lack the framework for understanding that they're in a domestic abuse relationship, that there's a coercive controlling situation that is creating harm. and that harm has a physiological, emotional, and other kinds of toll and impact on their body and health. And so from that perspective, using this, encouraging people to use this tool gives us the ability to collect those patterns, and then later on potentially have a healthcare provider or a professional, whether it's a social worker or a case manager or a physician, take a look at it and see those patterns and have a conversation about it. So it preserves your ability to be able to bring awareness to your situation later, even if you don't have it right away, once you start using it. The second part with the community is, we know that there is all of the systems that survivors encounter, whether it's the criminal justice system, the healthcare system, child welfare system, education system, et cetera, as we live in a sexist society, there is going to be sexism in the form of gender bias. And that shows up in the statistics around how crimes against women are responded to, mostly not seriously. And the ways in which professionals respond potentially could also add more trauma, right? And so knowing that the systems are going to most likely not respond positively and also most likely create more harm, I think it's important for us to be able to recognize that the benefits of this app, again, comes with networking. And so let's go to my example. By the way, the Zoom user who has your hand up, I see you. We're going to answer your question. Yes, we are looking for people to use the app, and then I'll address the children, but we don't have, I'll address the issue of the child. So, for me, I've been in family court for, this year is going to be the 17th year of being in family court, and my child is turning 17 this year. So I left my abuser when I was pregnant. And I have been through every system that I named. So what's helpful to me, even though I'm no longer in that relationship, I'm still engaging with various people in the system. So I do have a family attorney, who's an assigned attorney. I do have quote unquote, court appointed officials like the attorney for the child and obviously the judge, people I would deem as bad actors who are contributing more harm. And then when I go to seek help from medical profession or mental health profession, for the most part, they've not been that helpful. And so in that respect, if I were to have an interaction with my abuser, let's say during a visitation exchange, and I'm sure a lot of us can relate. For me, initially, the first 5.5 years of my son's life, my son's father had 5 times a week visitation. So there were 5 times a week opportunities for him to weaponize those visits against me in some way, which he never, failed not to do. And so every day I was in constant anxiety in anticipation of the next visit. And then during the visitation exchange, there were also opportunities to create more drama. So my son wouldn't be returned at the right time. I had to be on call to run all over the 5 boroughs in New York City where I was living. And maybe he came back with physical injury. He was limping, or he had bruises that were clearly, should have been shared with me, where he didn't get the get to see seek medical help for. He was pre-verbal for a large part of, these situations, so he couldn't talk. And so part of my triggers was not being able to help my child and seeing him suffer and being a victim of, coercive control and domestic abuse. And so that is where you would want to document those triggers and then the symptoms. And for me, my symptoms were, heart palpitations, headaches, sleep disturbances. We used insomnia in this case as an example, and then physical pain. And then later on, when you, for many of us, it's not surprising if we end up with, chronic autoimmune, illnesses. And so it's important to document these symptoms, because when these things happen, we can then correlate it properly to the things that we experience that, create this reaction. And so this goes back to the societal part and the community part. Why is it important? Because we want to be able to quantify the economic, the healthcare, and the social cost of abuse, which isn't being fully accounted for right now. And we know that there's a cost to adverse childhood experiences on the children's part. We know there's a traumatic cost to the victim, adult victim, in terms of disruptions to work, to health, obviously, and potential, coping mechanisms that they might turn to, such as substance misuse, potentially, or addiction issues that might come up. And these are all things that we want to be able to properly attribute. And so to the extent that we can get people to use this and document it, and then later on, put the players and people, bad actors, as I said, in this app, then we can start seeing patterns of bias in various places that we can use, as Chanel said, potentially in a de-identified way, to hold these people and systems to account. And so I see this as, sort of the pre-big tobacco in the making. Nothing happened with tobacco. We knew that there were issues with smoking, but until you had enough people that collectively, class action tort cases against the tobacco industry and whatnot. Similarly, now with the opioid crisis, the manufacturers and the distributors are now being held to account. So we need to hold the people to account who are in the system, who are not doing what they're supposed to do. And this is one way of doing that. And so with that, I will open it up to the Q&A. I don't know if that Zoom user, if I answered your question or not, or if you wanted more elaboration.
Terry, I just want to say one final thing about Zamplo and the word recognition, aspect of it, because I think for myself, when I'm dealing with a legal situation right now. My husband is passed, but I have had to dig up information of conflict that did occur, and I'm doing that presently through my email. And I, with Outlook or whatever, you can do any word recognition, and I go through all the emails that come up with like nurse. When I had to visit a nurse, and you could do the same within the app. But I think that because you're not going through so much information and you're just specifically looking at the conflict, it would be much easier to access. Chanel, do you want to say any more to that?
Yeah, so a couple of things I'll address. One is, Karen, when you're talking about the word search, you're talking about how you could put basically all your paper into Zamplo and make it fully searchable. Is that the?
Yeah, I was talking about the conflicts in particular, or when you were saying, if you needed to figure something out and you had that one word to identify, my understanding was that it would come up in the journals or. So
this is like, every journal here could be searchable. And so, for example, if you're asked, well, how often do you have insomnia? You can actually do a keyword search and it'll actually show you every time you had insomnia, and you can go through your journals and look back. So if you have to have, basically, I would say Zamplo declutters your mind by putting a lot of this information that you have to put in your memory into an app that's fully searchable. And that could be as you record encounters. For example, I think we have examples of abuser. So every time you've had a contact with an abuser, you could put in notes and what were your triggers. As you can see, you could just scroll through it. So it records the date, time that you had a contact with an abuser and some notes. For example, here are some notes. My abuser came to my workplace. This is my experience when that happened. This is the date. You could even put in photos if you want. And so it shifts from preoccupied with your mind, put in the application, and then you could start advocating for yourself with this data here. And then on top of that, you have the layer of the community. We have a couple questions which I'll address. And then you could actually take this and create a report or a graph to present it to whomever you deem important. Karen, did that answer your question or support your question?
Yes, yeah, I just wanted to show that it was, the benefits. We've only, and I wanted to reinforce this too, is we've only talked about the ones to try not to confuse people that we thought were the easiest to understand and the easiest of what you would probably access in a situation like this. But once you download Zamplo and you start to understand it more, it's got so many more applications to it. But I think for myself, when I was on it in my own situation, I don't think I would have had a lot of time to access it. And it would have been just sort of an in and out to try and record it. But realizing that if I needed access to it later on, just like how you could aggregate all that information and get it just by that search action. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we should probably go on to the questions.
Yeah. So one thing, we have a few questions here. One thing I want to address. So as Terry mentioned, yes, we are looking for volunteers for using the app. Anybody in the world could download the application and use it. If you want to be part of the trial, we'll show you at the end how to register. It is different because when you register for the trial, you get a templated version of Zamplo. Are we looking for data on children? I'll let Terry answer that question. But what I would say is we do have guardians using the Zamplo for pediatric care. And what you could do is you could create an account for a child and then what you use is caregiver access to actually log into their account, and then you could record information on their behalf. So as the guardian, and I could always send information on that respect, or you could contact me. But the whole concept here is, as a parent, you could record your own information, and then you could use the caregiver access and flip over. We haven't set it up for this account, but you could flip over to your child's Zamplo account and record information on their behalf. And the benefit of that is that as they get older, as teenagers, they can record their own information. As they get adults, you basically gift them their health history. Because so many people here, like myself included, we don't have our history from childhood. And so that's a benefit of Zamplo. The other question, before I go to the next question, Terry, do you want to answer the question about data on children?
Yeah, I think that so for the purposes of this pilot, I just want to emphasize, we're trying to recruit people for this pilot as a proof of concept that data for accountability is someone asking a question?
No, I think it's interference. Please go ahead.
Okay, so that data for accountability in this way is valuable and necessary because the various systems have sort of accountability measures that are inadequate. So many people in the systems, for example, have immunity. So you can't, you can't sue someone. But if you have 100 people who have suffered, the same injustice from the same person, there are exceptions to immunity if you can prove that there's a pattern that basically would be, in this case, deliberate. And so, so to that extent, if you wanted to share, use this app for your child, I would say, sure, use the caregiver aspect, but that's not part of what we're collecting for the pilot. We care about the adults. And so if you're going to be collecting something for the child, it would undermine the validity of the proof of concept if your child is the only one who's getting symptoms, but you're not, because both of you theoretically are being victimized. And so we should be able to see that you get certain symptoms, and then you get symptoms from vicariously observing your child and not being, able to respond appropriately, to give your child the need and support, the help and support they need, as well as your child is getting, symptoms. But if your child's the only one getting symptoms and you don't have, your own account, then I think there's going to be some sort of disconnect. So that's what I have to say there. And I know we didn't touch upon this too much, but there was one slide at the very beginning that Chanel touched upon, which is the fact that the results are going to be shared on October 2nd, I believe, which is the second day of our International Coercive Control Conference that the Engendered Collective has put together with, our members. And that is a conference and an opportunity where people from all around the globe, hopefully, can be presented with the value of just the concept of data, for accountability, because so much of what's happening in this space, violence against women, we don't collect data, even femicide data. I'm sure many of you know, Dawn Elizabeth Wilcox, single-handedly a nurse in Texas, is collecting femicide data because the federal government doesn't do it because they don't think it's important, and so so to that extent as well, this is an opportunity for us to be able to really put forth and highlight this idea that there are things that are happening to us that are not being supported with data, and that we can collect it. We're going to crowdsource it, and we're going to do something about it. So I'll turn it back to you, Chanel, to answer the other questions on the security part.
Yeah. So the other question we had is about safety measures to ensure that the abuser cannot access the community feature. So the community feature is anonymous in the sense that you don't put your real name there. When you register, actually, first off, when you register for the app, you do not automatically become part of the community. You have to go to the community and you have to check off the terms and conditions, and it illustrates how you should be. You don't put your real name. You put a fake username. You could put in your medical conditions, and as you can see here, there's not much information. The only information that is visible is your medical conditions, and then also a little bit of your story, which is your you could free text that. When you see your connections, again, it is anonymized. So the question is that, can somebody, let's say abuser, come in and find you? I think it is a low probability, but they could do that. And you do have the ability to report or block the individual. And that's the level of security we have. And part of the pilot is to make sure that this is adequate. Now, we don't monitor communications because of privacy. And so it is self-monitored at this point. The other question we had about symptoms and standardization. Symptoms are standardized. If I go over here to symptoms, so we have a whole database of symptoms such that you could key it in and then it'll auto-populate. Now, that does not restrict you from entering your own symptom. What we do is, as we get this whole list of symptoms, we continuously populate and standardize the symptoms, health data, any activities, And the reason is because that's the only way to actually run analytics on it. And that'll be de-identified, but we are growing the list of symptoms such that the syntax is always the same. Now, all the data is confidential. We, as in Zamplo, does not have access to your data. I'll just show you a bit about the slide deck here about privacy and security. So the data is confidential. It's never shared. Zamplo does not have access to the information. All the data is encrypted, even on your phone. We also use, well, strong authentication. The platform we use is the same platform that banks use. So if you're comfortable with banking online, you should be comfortable with Zamplo. We are HIPAA, we comply to the HIPAA privacy regulations, as well as the Canadian and European. And so the difference between us is that it is very much a worldwide platform for people to use. Hence, the community could be accessed by anybody in the world. All the data is stored in Canada. And the reason is Canada is a safe haven when it comes to privacy from government, as well as what you could do with the personal data. Being data stored in Canada means we could serve people in Europe and anywhere in North America. And I can also go into more details into the security aspects of it. In terms of the cost of the application, right now, if you download the application, there's a free version and an in-app purchase of $5 a month. The in-app purchase allows you a few additional features, but everything what you see today is part of the free version. However, all participants get the premium version, which is $50 a year. And that premium version allows you to do that search of all that paper, all that text. It gives you a lot more, it gives you unlimited reports, unlimited graphs, a lot more capacity, basically. But the features are the same, but a lot more capacity. And so people who register for the trial get the premium version. Sorry, there's a question about if I'm presenting symptoms, the justice system doesn't seem concerned about me. I'm not sure to answer that question. Maybe Terry can.
Yeah, I mean, I think many of us can relate. Many of the survivors, and certainly in the Engendered Collective community, are protective moms. And we have gone through, innumerable times not having our trauma reaction to the abuse believed, and also, maybe pathologized against us, used against us to harm us or to create harmful outcomes for us and our children. And so we definitely empathize. And that is primarily one of the main reasons for me to want to do this pilot, because I do feel, I gave the example to Chanel the other day, I do feel that this is kind of like, if you know finance, it's like buying a futures option, so there's data that you might not need right away, but you preserve the right to act on that data later, as more people come onto the platform and share their data, as we start seeing patterns of harm that the users have experienced, we can then use that data to empower us for accountability, whatever that may look like. And there was a question about whether this is appropriate for your friend who has cancer. Certainly the basic version does. For this pilot, which is a separate link, and as Chanel said, has the same level of features and feature sets as the premium version, the paid premium version for this pilot, that we are trying to use for people who have experienced trauma and basically domestic violence survivors. And so to the extent that your friend may have symptoms with cancer or medical, symptoms that they want to share, and they're not a survivor, I would suggest that they use the regular app. But if they are a survivor in any sense, even if their relationship ended, years ago, if that person is in their life, or if that person even isn't in their life, maybe that person has passed away or moved away, but they're still responding with trauma symptoms, I think it's valuable for that individual to use the app and join our pilot.
Yeah, the one thing I would add, I just put in the URL for Zamplo.org. So yeah, anybody could download the application and use it if they're using it for chronic disease or cancer. If it's for this context, as Terry mentioned, to really, from a domestic violence perspective, going through the trial is best, because then we could legitimize the application for that purpose. And that is one of the goals of the pilot. I'm just looking at the other, there's a comment here about the value of being able to collect emotional and other forms of abuse, not only physical. And that's part of the I think the benefit of the platform is that it's very flexible, that you could record any information. Eventually we want to get, as Terry mentioned, is the crowdsourced information and make it public. Like, we are completely wholly independent of any government institution. And so we're really trying to do this as a grassroots citizen scientist perspective of actually identifying legitimate data, and making people, especially people in positions of power, aware.
And I also wanted to address just a little bit more the privacy aspect around security and safety. And Karen mentioned this, alluded to this in her presentation. So if you can't access your app, if someone is surveilling your app, if you're actively in a relationship where your phone isn't fully free, you can access, what you can do is create a anonymous email account. So for example, Proton Mail, those are all secure end-to-end email platforms. And you can log into Proton Mail at your friend's place and email yourself, the note. It'll go into your account. And yes, it is GDPR compliant. It is compliant with GDPR Canada and US data rules, privacy rules. So to that extent, you would want to, you would be able to keep it from your abuser.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, one thing I'd extend to that, Terry, is that you could use the app, the web app on your phone without installing the app on your phone. So you could be discreet that way. The other feature we have is that if you want to take a note or a photo, you could, this month we're coming out with a feature where you could email concierge@zamplo.org and it'll automatically create a journal for you. So this is all about taking the data from your mind and what situation and just pushing it all into Zamplo. And at some future point, you could take, you could look at it and look back at it. So that's another way of being discreet and using it. I think there's yeah. So as Terry mentioned, anybody in the world could use it, and partly because the way we've organized it from a privacy and security standpoint, we cover basically all jurisdictions. The secret sauce is that this is to empower you, and you put the information in, and you have the right to be forgotten. There's a way in the app, like if you go to profile, you actually could delete the app, and it means it deletes everything off our system, including all our backups. So we give you the full control in terms of data management.
And I think one thing we wanted to note for this webinar today that we didn't get a chance to say so much in the last Friday's version is that Shanil is actually working with his team to create guided prompts in the app, so that when you log in at the end of August, I think is the timeline, early September when it'll be available, there'll be pop-ups that'll guide you and remind you, to do certain things, which is really helpful, I know, for many of us who, whose memory and sort of executive functioning might be impaired by our trauma as we experience it. So it helps you maintain that routine. And the other benefit of being part of the pilot, which I think is really essential, is that Chenille and his team will be available to do a one-on-one customization with you if you need to help, if you need that help for signing on and customizing it for your own benefit. So you would just sign on and reach out to their team and set that up.
Yeah.
And I want to add really quickly before you wrap up. I think the situation, like when the person said that she felt like they didn't care about her in the legal system. And I think that's how we all kind of feel to a certain degree. But when I initially came forward and was saying the system doesn't help you, like I was trying to find help for my abuser, but of course, and but help for myself, my children as well. It was told to me that I shouldn't come out as a survivor, domestic abuse survivor, because the validity of what I was trying to do would be dismissed in the system. And as I'm going and I'm realizing how inadequate the system is in every perspective, I was having a discussion about something entirely different with a deputy police chief. And we got on to the fact that I had done this TikTok. And just because of the fact that her daughter was onto TikTok. And I showed her this and she said, how come our domestic abuse unit doesn't know about this? And we make this assumption that everybody is fully informed about the situation and understands the system in its entirety. And they don't. They just know their domain and that's it. They don't know how it interacts and how they have to collaborate in order to sort of improve the situation. So what we're trying to do here is have a pilot project, a pilot sample of the impact that we can have by having people that are actively in situations and how it has helped them and how we can take the situation and show with the success that we've had with this pilot study. And then we can lobby that the system changes for our benefit, ultimately. And that's what we're really, really trying to do. So that's why it's so important to try and get a handful of people. Chenille, ideally, it would be anything 30 plus, because it strengthens our message that the system does have to change and it is not supporting us and it does not understand the reality of the situation.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. And I know we're a bit over time. Well, I'll say one thing about the platform and then about how to participate, and then I'll hand it over to Terry for final words. Platforms like ours, so one thing is our platform is used in clinical studies, which means it's approved from ethics, which means the data is legitimate. Platforms like ours is often directed to researchers, pharma, government to use. We're flipping that model and we're giving that power to you and those type of tools to you to use for your own needs. But then we're partnering with Engendered and other organizations. We have 15 organizations in a variety of you could say, medical diseases and conditions. But the whole concept here is let's give you the power and let's give organizations the power so they could have a voice with data that's legitimately collected. And that's kind of the synergies and one of their missions at Zamplo. To register with the pilot, please go to this website. It's zamplo.org/engendered-collective. I will put it into the chat feature while Terry talks, but oops, sorry. Where did it go? Oh yeah, this is it right here. And once you go to the landing page, it talks a bit about how Zamplo could be used in your circumstance. And then you could add your name and your email address. We will then give this information to Terry, who will then add it to Zamplo, and then you'll get a welcome message and a process to sign up. The first step is to go to our landing page if you want to participate in the pilot. And then from there, the process starts. And the next step is to register. You'll get a template. You'll have access to me and my team, and we're happy to support you through the pilot because we are also here to learn as well. Terry, I'll hand it back to you.
Sure. So thank you, Chanel. Thank you, Karen. And thank you to all the attendees today. We hope that you find this pilot just as valuable as we do. And please feel free to share with anybody who is interested, who is a survivor, who is eligible. And if they would like to join the Engendered Collective community, you can have them reach out to me. Okay, thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your weekend.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.